The following program is presented by the Metropolitan Library Service Agency.
Hello, welcome to All About Kids, a program focusing on the interests of children and young people and some of the issues affecting them. Nutrition plays an important role in the development of all children. However, children with disabilities may have special nutritional needs which need proper professional assessment. Today's guest, Roberta Kehne, is a registered nutritionist who holds a master's degree in nutrition and food science from Florida State University. Ms. Kehne consults with area agencies on the nutritional needs of people with disabilities. Roberta, when I heard you giving the presentation at the workshop that was sponsored by the United Cerebral Palsy Association, I was absolutely fascinated and very interested in the whole concept of the nutritional needs of children with disabilities. How did you get involved in this? I know you have an undergraduate degree in fine arts. How did you go from fine arts to nutrition?
Well, I have always been interested in nutrition. In fact, one of my undergrad degrees is in home economics with a concentration in nutrition. But when I was doing my graduate work, and I had to choose a topic for my thesis, I chose something that was very close to this particular topic. In fact, actually, what I was interested in at that point was kitchen utensils for folks with disabilities, and in order to do my research, I had to find out what had been done before, and I went to the library and was really horrified that there was nothing there. And I started digging a little further and a little deeper, and as I found that there was really, in my opinion, not all that much there, my knowledge base on the topic grew to the point where I really became interested in that particular population.
Well, what are the differences? Why do you need to be more concerned about children with disabilities?
Well, I don't think you need to be more concerned. I think you need to be concerned about different things. Two of the biggest differences between the nutritional needs of children with disabilities and those without are the differences in caloric needs, how many calories are needed during the day, and also the differences in texture. Some children with disabilities cannot handle regular food. They have a difficult time chewing or swallowing, or sometimes even digesting foods of certain textures.
I know at the workshop that I saw you present, you had people trying to eat crackers with dry mouths and without using hands, and
right.
It was really a very good experience to have that kind of.
I think that people probably learn more and remember more in that little 2-minute segment.
One soda cracker took forever to get
Yes.
to get down. Well, what about the caloric needs? Why do children with disabilities have different caloric needs?
Well, sometimes it's a difference in metabolism. For instance, a child with a certain type of cerebral palsy might have a very high metabolism. He might be constantly moving. Constantly spasming, and this for all practical purposes is like doing aerobic exercises all day long.
Right.
So he does need quite a few more calories. In fact, in one of the studies that I came across when I was doing my graduate work, they were trying to estimate caloric needs of children with CP, and they found one 17-year-old boy who was severely underweight, but just to keep him at that same degree of being underweight, he had to consume 6,000 calories a day. And I think that's probably more than the two of us would eat in 2 days.
Yes, yes.
So, yeah.
Well, what kind of implications then does this have for teachers or for parents? A kid in the classroom then would need to eat more during the day than children?
That's right. And what he does eat may need to be fortified with calories, and by that I mean you don't serve plain crackers. You serve crackers with butter or peanut butter or cheese, and when you have vegetables are potatoes or hot cereal, whatever, you put butter or some kind of spread on them, and you sneak things in like powdered or non-fat dry milk powder into meatloaves and into puddings and into mashed potatoes. And one thing you don't do is you don't supplement with candy, because candy, cookies, sweets, because while I have no problem with those things in their proper place, and in my opinion, the proper place for those things would be treats every now and then. Those are, in effect, empty calories, and most people don't need that. There are some exceptions, but those are few and far between.
When you're doing your consulting, are you working with teachers? Do you work with doctors?
I've worked before with teachers and with rehab staff, a lot of parents. The doctors I have not had a lot of contact with.
Are the schools set up to make sure that the children who are in classrooms with these kinds of extra needs can make sure that the kids get what they need during the day?
I think they're trying. I think that as more and more it is known, I think that they are making an attempt.
Well, when you do an assessment of a child with a particular nutritional need, what are the steps that you go through?
Okay, to do an assessment, you basically need to know 4 things. You need to know, one, what his height and weight would be, and when you measure a child who has a disability, a lot of times you want to factor out age. When you, for instance, take your son in to have his checkups in the fall, they have a little chart that they use, and they measure height and weight against age. Well, a lot of kids with disabilities do not grow at the same rate. So what you do is you factor out age and you measure weight against height, which will give you a better indication of where they are proportionally weight for height.
So then you'd make a recommendation to the parent or the teacher how the child's diet might be supplemented, or where they should be going?
I would look at that before I make a recommendation. I would also want to know what kind of medications he's taking, because a lot of the medications that people with disabilities take on a regular basis has a great interplay with nutrition. For instance, certain medications will make you less hungry, will decrease your appetite. Certain ones will make you hungrier, they'll increase your appetite. They may suppress growth. They may increase possibility of constipation. There are a lot of factors that can be brought back to medication use. So that's another thing you'd have to consider. And then, excuse me.
I was just going to ask, do you work with the parents then? What if they do have preschoolers are sometimes picky eaters anyway, and if you have a parent that's real concerned that the child isn't getting enough to eat and they know how important it is, you can't force feed a child. What, do you use psychology?
You can't force feed them, but you can do certain things to try and make sure that they are eating when they should, what they should. But excuse me, I've lost my place here.
It's because I jumped ahead of you.
Yeah. I tell you what.
Well, that maybe is what.
I tell you what. Can we finish this lesson first, and then we'll. And the final thing that you want to talk about during assessment would be the particular needs of, or the particular conditions caused by the disability. For instance, a child with CP, depending on the type of CP he has, may be prone to constipation, or may be very sedentary, or may once again have a higher metabolism. A child with Down syndrome would have another set of needs and spina bifida, and so on and so on. So you've got to get the whole picture.
Do you do these individually, or?
Yes. It's important to do the assessment, or to gear the assessment towards the child and not towards the disability group.
How do you reassure parents who are worried that their child might not be doing the right thing for the age?
Well, that's just like getting back to that height and weight chart. A lot of times children with disabilities do not progress at the same rate as quote-unquote normal children. I think all the while I was in school, I had these normal progression or milestone charts shoved in front of me. I kind of have had to just throw those all out now because they just really are not valid for children with disabilities. I think it's important to be able to look at the progress that the individual child is making, and just work to keep making progress at his or her own rate. And this may involve bringing in some professionals, some people who really specialize in those certain areas, like, for instance, an occupational therapist, physical therapist, speech therapists are very important when it comes to the area of chewing and swallowing.
So that's interesting. I wouldn't think of a speech therapist working with a child who isn't chewing.
Most definitely. So, and then in turn, those beginning eating skills, the chewing and swallowing and sucking, are important in the development of speech.
And I suppose proper digestion too. So does this speech therapist then work with the child to show them that?
Well, they work with the child, or where it's appropriate, they work with the parent.
Oh, I want to digress a little bit too from our questions and just ask, do you do any work directly with children? Do you talk to children themselves about the disability and about eating and nutrition?
Yes, I have. I have spoken, well, not with children, but with high school students. Once again, it's the special population that I have been in the classroom setting. I find that that's probably the most nerve-wracking because you've got questions coming in from every angle, and they all demand answers. And
I imagine they might be more willing to listen to someone more their own age, like you, than they would be to a parent who is saying, you've got to eat, these are the kinds of things you need to eat.
Yeah, I think we all have a tendency to want to do that.
Well, if the child can't meet the caloric needs, or if you have to modify the caloric content, how do you do that?
Well, if the child is underweight, you would of course supplement. And as I said, you would do this with, first of all, table foods, with the butters and the sauces and the whole milks and the gravies. And if this didn't work, you could go to a pharmaceutical supplement. I personally tend to shy away from those things. I would really much rather do it with table food if at all possible. And then the last resort, although in some children it's very, very necessary, not as a permanent solution, but as a temporary solution, as I suppose you might put in a tube feeding system. I think that's scary to a lot of parents.
Oh, I would think, and to the child too. Mm-hmm. I was interested, as we were talking before, your opinion of vitamins was quite strong. The fact that most people really don't need a special.
Vitamins are important, but I guess I always remember the explanation given to us by one of my graduate professors is that although the body needs them, they are in effect just chemicals. And when you get more than you need, it stops using it to build the body, and it just starts reacting to it, or your system just starts reacting to it as another chemical. It's kind of like a car with gasoline. You've got to keep the tank full, but if you try to put too much in it, it's not helpful either. And so my feeling, maybe that's not the best analogy, but it's the only one I've got.
Sounds good.
But my opinion on vitamins is that if you are not eating a balanced diet, they may be a good idea, but you certainly don't need the 400 or 500% of the RDA that are found, or that is found in some of these super duper tablet things. Basically, what I would do is I would go to the store and get whatever's on sale and check it to see if it's got approximately 100% of the RDA.
Well, we've talked about children who are underweight. What about children who are overweight?
Okay, children who are overweight are different than adults who are overweight, in that you really don't want them to diet in the sense we all think of dieting. You want to slightly modify their caloric intake so that they do what we call grow into their weight. You want to, rather than decreasing their weight, you want to hold it at a constant while you let their height increase. And of course, ways to do this would be cutting out the sweet snacks. For the most part, I personally have a hard time with the idea of cutting out all sweets.
So do I.
Yeah, I don't think that's necessary, and quite frankly, I don't think that it's healthy either. Cut out the sweets, some of the sweet snacks. Cut out some of the gravies and sauces, some of the butters. You use skim milk, use more fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, etc. And, of course, with the physician's advice, start some kind of exercise program, because this will be helpful, and this will be helpful in a variety of areas, not just weight loss. The child will gain strength and stamina too, which is a lot of times a big problem for kids with, or for people with disabilities.
We've just got a little bit of time left, and I'd like to ask you, you've got some interesting, or an interesting theory about mealtime behavior and manners for children who have disabilities or may have some problems eating.
Okay. One thing I think is real important is appropriate behavior. And there are a lot of ways to deal with inappropriate mealtime behavior, consistency, discipline, etc. But you can't stop there. I think it's important for children with disabilities to have good table manners, because, a lot of times parents are not concerned with the table manners of the children. They're just so excited that they're consuming food. The problem is that when they grow up and they don't have this training, it's going to be very hard to instill it then. And I think society is unfortunately still a little more sensitive, and they'll tend to look a little harder at what that person with the disability at the next table is doing. And it's just, in my opinion, a very important way to correct a problem before the problem appears.
Roberta, this has been very interesting. Thank you very much for being with us
Thank
today
you. I
on All
enjoyed
About
it.
Kids.
Sing a Song of Popcorn, Every Child's Book of Poems, selected by Beatrice S de Regniers. This wonderful collection of poetry, and I emphasize the word wonderful, is a real find. Not only is this a diverse, well-rounded collection of poetry, but it is an attractively illustrated work of art. Both modern and traditional poets are represented here. Eve Merriam, Robert Louis Stevenson, Jack Prelutsky, A.A. Milne. The book is divided into 9 sections, each one illustrated by a different Caldecott Medal winner. The 9 sections are Fun with Rhymes, illustrated by Trina Schardt-Hyman, Mostly Weather, illustrated by Marcia Brown, Spooky Poems, illustrated by Margot Zemak, Story Poems, illustrated by Maurice Sendak, Mostly Animals by Arnold Lobel, Mostly People, illustrated by Mark Samant, Mostly Nonsense, illustrated by Richard Igilsky. Seeing, Feeling, Thinking is illustrated by Leo and Diane Dillon. And the last section, In a Few Words, is again illustrated by Marcia Brown. It's interesting to compare the different styles of illustrations as well as the diversity of the poems in this collection. The best way to enjoy this book is to take the editor's advice and to read the poems out loud. I have one to share. Ella Telephony by Laura E. Richards. Once there was an elephant who tried to use a telephone. No, I mean an elephone who tried to use a telephone. Dear me, I am not certain quite that even now I've got it right. However it was, he got his trunk entangled in the telephone. The more he tried to get it free, the louder buzzed the telephone. I fear I better drop this song of Ella Hop and Telephone.
Sing a Song of Popcorn, Every Child's Book of Poetry, reviewed by Wendy Woodfill, Children's Services Librarian at the Minnetonka Community Library. Thanks for joining us on All About Kids. Please tune in again.
This has been a presentation of Hennepin County Library in conjunction with the Twin Cities Metropolitan Library Service Agency. We thank you for watching, and we hope you visit your public library often.